Doesn't Insurgency Sandstorm feel like it's gone a little bit quiet recently? Like, where's the developers? Where are the updates? You know, the last major patch we got was all the way back in March of this year. Yep, it's been almost 8 months since we've heard anything from these guys, and I don't know what's going on. So I thought, let's actually look into this. What is the future of Sandstorm? And why is this once brilliant game slowly dropping off a cliff edge? What is the actual point of Insurgency Sandstorm's future? The game released over 4 years ago now, and it is still fantastic. Its player base is still relatively there. There still seems to be a good amount of servers going up every evening, with a few thousand concurrent players. However, it's definitely dropped off, and unless there's a new operation out, people don't seem to be coming back. Is this just down to the lack of content, and if so, what is going on with that lack of content? In 2020, the developers of Sandstorm sold their studio. They wanted to move on to bigger and better things, and of course, there was a massive chunk of change to go with it. We've heard this before, such as Hell Let Loose with Black Matter Games, who brilliantly set up their World War II simulator shooter to be sold to a massive company in Team 17. They sold it for over $40 million, and yeah, that has been a bit of a rocky start. But Insurgency Sandstorm did the same. They sold to Embracer Group. Now, Embracer Group isn't a certain developer or publisher. It's actually a large conglomerate, a number of companies, all in subsidiaries to one big head honcho. They own hundreds of studios, over 130 to be clear. And that's not it. Within this, they have hundreds and hundreds of games that all have their own genres and titles. Anything from Prime Matter, who publish and release things like Kingdom Come Deliverance now, to all the way to the Tomb Raider games, so on and so forth. There's a huge variety, and Embracer Group are the heads above it all. They are the puppet masters that give everybody money and decide how or when they give or take away funding. And the idea behind this was to give a title like Insurgency Sandstorm a huge boost, a huge amount of extra cash flow in order to take them to another level. But we already know that there are issues with Sandstorm's development. Various maps and content were cut, a full campaign was cut upon release as well, and this at the time was down to a lack of funding. And I kind of guess this is what led into Embracer Group buying the studio to say, we've got the money, we can continue this development. But they haven't done so. In doing so, heading into a massive conglomerate means that money and revenue is their only aim. The actual love and passion that Insurgency Sandstorm's developers had at the start is no longer there, because they are no longer reliant on the direct income that Sandstorm makes from sales. Instead, the game has shifted way more towards microtransactions such as DLCs, skins, and of course the in-game store. Content release has been pretty much sparse. Then, it all started to go wrong. You see, it's all well and good being bought by a bigger conglomerate that have the cash flow in order to outweigh the negatives. You see, yes, creative control is being taken away, but you have a chance to do more stuff. And if this company have the right intentions for the game, it's likely you're going to get to do more and bigger exciting things with your title. But it can go the other way. What if that company doesn't have the cash flow? What if instead they decide to make cuts? You see, in June of 2023, Embracer Group announced plans to put huge cuts into the games. Mostly games that haven't already been released, so Insurgency Sandstorm shouldn't have been hit that hard. But in general, they said they were going to reduce spending and decrease third-party spending as well because of a huge $2 billion contract that fell through. They panicked, and in order to save money, they cut the costs. And so many titles suffered because of this. To protect their investment, they are hamstringing one of their most popular titles and many, many more. And this doesn't just affect Insurgency Sandstorm. As I mentioned, they own an insane amount of studios, and this is going to hurt all of them. Now, this was back in June, so at the time it was all speculation. What effect would this actually have on a game like Insurgency Sandstorm? Would it really hurt it that bad? Well, I think it kind of says it all when we haven't had any more updates, when there haven't been any big content releases. Anything we've had, small operations or October Halloween festivals or even a couple of patches here and there to fix bugs. But the big content and map back in March was their last thing. And even then, it wasn't even in great condition. It was semi-broken. But that was way before all of this news about money cuts came through. So it does seem that the developers have not only slowed but almost halted. Is this down to the lack of funding, the cuts coming from their high overlords now, or is this just the way the game was going? It is getting pretty old, and there is potentially a scope for a new Insurgency game at this point in time. Yet, since this news came out, and seeing the knock-on effects for the current title, I'm very skeptical that that would ever happen. As mentioned, these cuts were mostly focused on third-party spending and games that hadn't come out yet. So, if it's affecting games that already are here, such as Sandstorm, it's going to completely demolish any hopes of a sequel in the future. Or a third game, I guess. Unless they call it Sandstorm 2. But there is hope. It is not all over for Insurgency Sandstorm. As mentioned, it still does have a player base. Its 24-hour peak is still hitting 2,200, which for a small-scale game like this is more than enough. There are still so many people that love and adore this game. It gets great reviews and it still has a growing player base to some extent. Now, the lack of content means that this might start to dwindle a little bit, but over the last 6 months, we have seen that the game is still up and up in its general player base over the 24-hour period. And this is just down to more releases from the community, whether it's maps or modifications on already established maps, and a core brilliant game. This was developed by passionate people that made a simulator shooter with beautiful graphics, with gorgeous gunplay, with realistic HUD and a lack of kill feed that ramped up the tension, meaning that you had to get visuals on bodies before you knew you actually got that kill, especially things like the sound design, which are beautiful. Or even game modes that cater towards a wide variety of people. It's all well and good saying that you have to be great to play against other players, but they added in stuff like AI, and AI that could actually be pretty good in hardcore checkpoint modes, meaning that even if you're not good enough or you don't enjoy playing against the hardcore modes of real players, you still got something out of the game and you still got a really fun experience. And that goes to show that even if you have a kind of dodgy future, a speckled past, and developers that don't know or seem to be communicating with what they're doing at the moment, a game can still prosper. It can still do well if the core is solid, and they managed to get that down well. But that brings us on to down the road. Will it last much longer? I think it's still got a good few years in it at this rate, and that's if it doesn't release anything else. I think we'll probably get a couple more content drops in 2024, but even by that point it would have been a full year probably before we get anything else. And that means that there's not going to be too much hope. I don't think we're going to see much more growth in Insurgency Sandstorm's player base. Whether the hardcore fans will drop off, I don't think so, because there isn't really anything to replace it. Things like Counter-Strike are way too arcadey, and things like Squad or Hell Let Loose are on a much larger scale to what the Insurgency fanbase are really about. So whilst there is no competition, there is no reason for them to leave. But I would really plead to the developers to give some more communication on what's going on. What are the plans for the future of this game? Because you still have a very loyal fan base that just are confused, that are wondering, where are the updates? Where are the developers? And what is the future of Insurgency Sandstorm?